President Cyril Ramaphosa has signed the first piece of legislation meant to provide a framework for South Africa's ability to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The law is in line with the country's efforts to develop a low-carbon and climate-resilient economy. Let's get some perspectives now with climate and energy campaigner at Greenpeace Africa, Myeza, and the head of communications at the Presidential Climate Commission, and that's Blessing Manale. Good afternoon to both of you, gentlemen. Thanks very much for your time. Let me start with you, Blessing, if I may. What is the Climate Change Act going to give us or do for us that which we weren't able to do until its enactment?
Well, thank you very much, and good afternoon to the viewers on Newzroom. The first thing, I think we're saying it's a groundbreaking legislation. I mean, for us as the Commission, firstly, because it formally institutionalizes as a Schedule 3A public entity, meaning that our existence is no more at the wish of the President. We are now created by law. The Commission was initially created by a cabinet decision or a cabinet minute. So broadly, it creates that institution. But secondly, I think that it obliges every organ of the state to consider the climate change implications of their policies, of their implementation plans and their programs. And it says that those considerations must be informed by polluter pay principles, risk aversion, science-based information. It basically means that government primarily will no more willy-nilly implement programs that would affect the environment and our climate action positively. So I think that's the right step. But the last thing briefly, before I allow you to just ask the other colleague, it now defines what a just transition is, and it clarifies that it's a shift towards a low carbon, climate resilient economy. But thirdly, it gives all the tiers of government what the premiers must do, what national government must do, and what local government must do in terms of putting in together, particularly adaptation plans, which is what we've been seeing missing in the country with all the adaptation and resilience, which is what we've been seeing missing with all the plans, with future planning and on a number of sectors. So for us, it's groundbreaking in that respect.
Myeza, is it what we needed?
Thank you, and greeting to the viewers. Certainly is, Vuyo. It came at a right time and with great spread of covering a great spread of important aspects. And as we know that it's quite significant for South Africa towards addressing the climate crisis, but also for the country to take responsibility for the carbon emissions. So I think the bill also will help the country to slow the intensive reliance on carbon energy and into a cleaner economy. So that's very plausible, and many opportunities that will be available as we implement the bill.
We do need a cleaner economy, a cleaner environment, as you say, Sia, but these things are not happening at a vacuum. If you look, for example, at our energy issues as a country right now, I mean, we have coal in abundance, and we're not able as a country to meet our energy needs. You would have seen the debates over the past week, especially over nuclear. Does the Climate Change Act take into account our present needs? In other words, are we being, as much as we need to take care of the environment, are we conscious and aware and not oblivious to our present situation and what we have currently that gives us that which we need to be able to survive, grow, and develop as a nation?
Yes, so from looking at the bill and the areas it covers, you can see that it caters for a slow transition to what we're looking at in the future. As much as Greenpeace, we don't necessarily agree with the carbon credit and budgets, but you can tell that the government is quite aware that we still need to we haven't reached our plateau in emissions. So some industries still need to get a permission to emit until a certain level. So that gives it a picture that when it comes to energy production, the bill gives us a sense that, or a direction that there will be investments in renewable energies, but also the current energy system will go on for a certain period of time. But also other industries in a value chain are catered for, and we definitely need to account with the implementation of the bill. So there's a myriad, and you can see that there's a thought-through process around how do we transition, what are the impacts, and how that would be mitigated.
Blessing, Manale, I mean, I'm sure you've had this argument or these arguments before, that we always try to pitch at the right level to be seen to be ahead of the curve. In the debates that are taking place, I mean, across the world. But the criticism has been that we're not as selfish, if I may put it like that, as some of the world's leading nations can be at times, certainly around these debates around a just transition.
Well, indeed, I mean, partly correct. There's been a view that says we're not looking into our national interest first. But entering into a multilateral environment means that ultimately you've got to think about the greater good of the world and of the globe. And that's why we've always said that the historic polluters must be able to bear the highest burden of the financial and economic cost of transitioning. So I think that we've communicated that. We have said that we need the money from the rich because they're responsible for the current climate crisis we face. But the reality of the matter is that South Africa remains the top emitter in the continent. So and in the highest top in the world. So we are among the poor, but I would say that we are the bad boys of the poor as a country. We have done better. And we've always said it's not about the just transition or energy security. We've always said that primarily we must make sure that we've got the right supply of clean energy to be able to drive our economic growth, balanced with the full cost analysis. If you fire a coal power station, what are the health implications of that? What are the water implications of that? If you are hauling the coal on road, what can those roads still be used by tourists in Mpumalanga? If you are moving into renewable energies, do you have enough and still works to move from the Northern Cape to the inland provinces? So we've always said energy security first, energy access first, but and economic growth and prosperity balanced within the notion of people, planet, and prosperity. The trilogy is not either or. And I think that some of the energy debates, particularly around nuclear or around oil and gas, have been an either or discussion. And I think that the integrated resource plan, we've only complained, as the PCs have said, that we seem to not be ambitious around renewables, as unlike in the past IRP, particularly for provinces like Mpumalanga. And we think that if we stick to our commitment, we should be able to find energy security without hastening the decommissioning of power stations, unless they've reached engineering end of life, economic end of life, and probably they are not as well as environmental end of life, where the cost of maintaining them are much higher than the cost of shutting them down. All things fair and square.
Are you agreeing with Sia? Are you agreeing with Blessing on especially the latter part of his response?
Certainly. I think as a country, we need to be really ambitious on renewable energy, especially when we look at the other implications or impacts of the current system we are in. I believe that we have more opportunities. Yes, the energy mix is good, but I think as South Africa and as Africa as a continent, we have a lot of renewable energy at our disposal, and we kept on being held in the conversation of whether or not to invest in these technologies. But if you look at the actual facts, I think the technologies of renewable energy and diversifying our energy source will ensure the health health of the communities that live around, especially in Mpumalanga, if you look at the recent health reports by Greenpeace and other organizations. So there's a lot of human sacrifice in the current system that we are using, and we are being offered a much cleaner system that will ensure that people are healthy, but more jobs are created and it's more sustainable. So definitely, I think the PCC is onto something, and this bill is allowing us to achieve such ambitious goals.
Well, Sia, Blessing talks about us being the biggest polluter on the continent, but when you look at our responses, but also the conversations we're having, including, of course, the enactment of this, of what was the climate change bill, now an act. If you compare or contrast our responses with, for example, the response of the biggest polluter in the world, which vetoes things or decides not to be passed, to be part of international agreements. God knows what's going to happen over the next few months if someone becomes a president of the United States of America. Do you believe that our responses are sort of, commensurate with our contribution, but also are we not at times looking like fools given the responses of those who are doing much, much more damage to the environment across the world than we do?
I think that's a very pertinent question, and I believe that there's a point that is made there in the question when we compare. But again, I think our vulnerability to climate change kind of forces us to act in this way, because we are in the global south, which makes us more vulnerable, but also the extreme weather events that we see, and also to be able, as my colleague mentioned here, Blessing, that the biggest polluters must pay. Of course, at the moment, the US is not part of the Paris Agreement, but again, within this context of just transitioning, we get to access more of the resources that will help us be resilient and less vulnerable to climate change. So there are wins, lots of wins. When we look at this trajectory that we're taking as a country, of course, there are a lot of negotiations, but we want to. The important part is to make sure that we preserve the environment that we have, the ecosystem services, but also leverage on the latest technologies and investments that are available.
Blessing, one of the among the three key reasons you spoke about as to why we needed this act was obligating organs of the state to essentially do the right things. Now, if you look at everything from, service delivery, if you look at your life as it demands, you look at the scandals, from your COVID-19 procurement arrangements, very often people know what's the right thing to do, but just never get to do it.
Well, indeed, you're correct, and that has been one of our key recommendations, has been that you can only transition when you've got a capable state, a developmental state, and you've gotten rid of things like corruption. For example, some of the South Africans, in addition to the environmental considerations for things like nuclear, one of the things that South Africans have always raised with major projects in South Africa has been corruption, the extension of the life of projects, inefficiencies in project development and implementation. So we appreciate the fact that we've got to deal with governance issues, and that's what we're saying, that it's structures like the Presidential Climate Commission and WWF and Greenpeace and a lot of civil society organizations that continue to say that we will watch the money. And particularly with the Just Energy Transition Investment Package, what came out of COP in Paris, South African NGOs said that we want to watch that money. We want transparency on the laws, we want transparency on the grants. So it is not something that we are totally oblivious and blind to. But the reality of the matter is that we've got to do these things, even if with those weaknesses. So we've got to continue to strengthen the state. and particularly local and provincial government. And you are correct. I mean, you have got the crisis about the floods that happened 2 years ago. People are still without residence. Becha is taking time to resolve its water crisis. You've got farmers complaining about how quickly they've got access to drought relief resources. So indeed, there are inefficiencies, but we cannot, no one is going to solve that. There's not going to be a magic one that we wake up and find out that everybody tomorrow is ethical, energized, and ready to work. But we've got to make sure that we build that capacity in the state. And we think that we are getting there. We have learned in the last 30 years. And the next 5-6 years towards 2030, where some of our hot targets are coming in, we should redouble efforts and regain the confidence of our people broadly.
Quick last thought from you, Sia. I mean, it looks certain that we're going the nuclear route. It's a matter of time. The Minister of Energy has said as much. Just your organization's position on the nuclear build program.
Thank you, Vuyo. That's a big thorn in the foot, really. Nuclear is, we as Greenpeace, we believe it's really greenwash, basically. It's not clean energy at all. And I think the implications, there are two very important things here. It's very, very expensive and requires specialists to maintain. While in the country where joblessness is thriving, and when we look at other options, there are much more jobs available that could cap or meet our other needs of jobs and creation of jobs. But also, I think for the environment and just the safety of the people, we do not have permanent or a sense of how to safeguard the nuclear waste. For civil society at large, that's where the conversation sits. If we invest in nuclear and push for that, what does it mean for the greater good? And who is going to finance such an expensive project while we have low-hanging fruits in cleaner energies?
Sia Myeza, Blessing Manale, thanks to both of you for being part of this conversation. Really appreciate it.